My favorite movie of all time is the 1974 sci-fi fantasy film Zardoz, directed by John Boorman. I don't mean for that to sound like a confession. I've never been one to put too much stock in the idea of guilty pleasures. Like what you like, and don't feel the need to feel guilty about it. But when I say that my favorite movie is Zardoz, I do feel like it begs for an explanation. Or maybe it doesn't. Chances are you've probably never seen it, and might not have even heard of it. Over the years, it's become something of a cult classic, mostly due to its reputation for overt weirdness, an artifact of the cooler 70s before 80s blockbusters drained the life out of popular cinema, but it's still fairly obscure. Maybe you've seen the infamous image of James Bond in a red speedo and matching bandolier, or maybe you've seen the clip on YouTube where a giant floating stone head vomits out a bunch of rifles and bullets while screaming, "The gun is good, the penis is evil."
The gun is good.
The gun is good.
The penis is evil. The penis shoots seeds.
Or maybe you've seen the Rick and Morty episode Raising Gazorpazorp that heavily references it, or the Community episode about Meow Meow Beans. When I googled it just now to double check the runtime, the first link past the Wikipedia entry was a Reddit post that literally asked the question, who the f*** is the audience for this? And apparently the answer to that is me. So that gets to the next obvious question. What the f*** is wrong with me? If you've never seen it, Zardoz is the story of Zed, a very hairy Scotsman living in a post-apocalyptic future wasteland who leads a tribe of barbaric marauders called the Brutals, who keep the population of starving survivors in line with rape and murder in the service of the film's mysterious titular god, that flying phallus-obsessed stone head I mentioned earlier. More inquisitive than his fellow murderous rapists, he decides one day to climb inside the mouth/gun hole of the thing he worships to see what all that penis stuff was really about. And he discovers it to be an artificial skyship piloted by a foppish magician who Zed promptly shoots and kills because he's just that kind of guy, leaving him stranded in the head as it takes him back to where it came from, a hidden world of highly advanced psychic elites who have been secretly controlling his whole life likely since before he was even born, exploiting his people's faith to help produce their grain and presumably keep the rabble from rioting through population control. A stranger in this new strange land, Zed instantly becomes an object of fascination for the people behind his religion, who have achieved immortality through cloning and have established a self-styled utopian society, with many welcoming the interruption of their placid, static existence out of curiosity or entertainment, while others are obviously wary of his potential to sow chaos and disorder. And so he does, his violent, in-your-face masculinity, barely concealed by his wily strategy of playing along with their underestimation of his intelligence, quickly brings down the matriarchal hive mind the way only Sean Connery's manly, hairy chest can. A few seductions and one psychedelic trip into a talking diamond supercomputer later, and Zed has completely upended this secret enclave of psychic weirdos until they are literally begging for a permanent death that only he and his good gun and evil penis could have brought them. So what's not to like? Yes, Zardoz is as insane as its reputation suggests, and often dismissed as unwatchable camp for that reason. To its many detractors, its multiple levels of convoluted lore and sometimes muddled themes are at best impenetrable and at worst nonsensical, a mishmash of pretentious, possibly drug-fueled guff from a crazy British director too high in his own supply and given far too much leeway after the unexpected success of his previous film, the also quite rapey survival thriller Deliverance. You know, the one with the banjos and Ned Beatty squealing like a pig. Even when you do hear someone regarding Zardoz positively, it's usually damning with faint praise, lauding its absurdity or appreciating it ironically as a so-bad-it's-good masterpiece. And I want to take this moment to stress that is not why I love this movie. I love Zardoz for what it is, what it tries to do, what it succeeds at, and what it fails at, and I take it very seriously. Earlier I mentioned how I had to double-check the runtime, and the reason for that is I almost reflexively referred to Zardoz as a 3-hour epic, but it turns out it's only an hour and 45 minutes. This genuinely surprised me. That's shorter than a lot of mainstream theatrically released movies today. It's an hour shorter than either parts of the recent Dune remake everybody loved, despite a notable lack of a scene where a man milks a cat to get the antidote for the poison killing him. Sorry for the aside, but leaving out that scene from the David Lynch version completely ruins the Dune remakes for me. It's almost as egregious as when Peter Jackson cut out the scene from Lord of the Rings where the Fellowship milks Tom Bombadil's 6 cat teats to get at the sweet, sweet poison antidote within. Just unconscionable. Anyway, my point is, Zardoz just feels like it should be 3 hours, because it's just so stuffed with ideas from end to end. It's kind of like Boorman's version of Richard Kelly's Southland Tales in a way, another ambitious sophomore failure that may have been mentioned in another video recently posted to this channel. It's like he was worried he was never going to get his chance to make his own weird post-apocalyptic Star Wars, so he decided to make it all the Star Warses at once, but not the fun adventure stuff with Jar Jar Binks and Maz Kanata, but that pre-edit, esoteric, up-its-own-ass Journal of the Wills stuff. Is it a commentary on religion as the proverbial opiate of the masses? A treatise on social class disparity about the eternal struggle between the haves and have-nots? An ironic critique of then-modern-day gender politics and the rise of second-wave feminism? A polemic against the folly of scientific utopianism? A silly piss-take on the Wizard of Oz? It's somehow all of these things and none of these things, all at once. A riddle wrapped in an enigma, nestled against the furry taint of a man in a clingy red speedo and matching bandolier. So where to begin, 7 paragraphs into this? I suppose the best place to start would be the end. Not just the end of the movie, mind you, but the end of everything. The apocalypse. As I write this, my home country, America, is facing a sort of apocalypse of its own, in which our free and democratic way of life, as illusory as it was to begin with, is quickly slipping into open authoritarianism. Feeling more and more dystopian and, well, brutal by the day. As Marines march on major cities to combat imaginary insurrections on the orders of actual insurrectionists, the phrase Kent State is currently trending at a popular social media site owned by the world's richest Nazi, with 45% of the people using it dreading the possibility of a new Kent State, and the other 45% salivating at the prospect to get back at the woke hippies they live to hate, along with a final 10% talking about some college football I don't care about. And all of this literal brutalization of our public discourse is clearly being done to pit us against each other for the benefit of the elites who already rule us and trick us into worshipping them, but who always want to take more away from us to enrich themselves in their secret enclaves of power, all spearheaded by a Sorry, didn't mean to get that deep into it that forcefully, but it's been a hard couple of months. Given how I've described the situation up to this point, you might be surprised to hear that I don't actually technically consider myself a Marxist. I certainly sympathize with and share a lot of Marxist principles to the extent that I understand them, but therein lies the rub. I don't really understand them, or at least I don't feel like I'm smart enough or well-read enough to have any credible claim to authentic Marxist ideology. I listen to a lot of Marxist YouTubers and generally agree with them, but at the end of the day, I'm just a big dumb guy who hates rich and powerful people and finds it viscerally satisfying to see them suffer and... In fiction. Of course, I'm referring to the narrative device, eat the rich, as how you would classify it in genre terms, and the climax of Zardoz might be the apotheosis of this trope. Zed's exploration of the upper echelon systemically reveals the sickening rot beneath this shining city on a hill. Charlotte Rampling and Sarah Kestelman's dueling Eternals, Consuela and May, fashion themselves philosopher god kings, or goddess queens, I suppose, preening in their delusions of intellectual and cultural superiority, only to descend into savagery the moment their authority is questioned, destroying the cultural artifacts of the old world they claim to value protecting to get to the man who revealed their shallow hypocrisy. Arthur Frayne, the wizard who created the Zardoz myth, and his friends, simply called Friend, pay lip service to the matriarchy's pretense of nobility while reveling in hedonistic excess, secretly harboring virulent misogyny and plotting their own eventual demise just for the fun of something different. Still others follow the path of the apathetics, shutting themselves off completely from all emotion and motivation, refusing to even move or feed themselves until Zed's virile power awakens them from their stupor. Kinda like what I'd be doing for longer than I'd care to admit. They own everything and it means nothing. Trapped in a gilded cage of their own making, living worthless lives, hoarding everything still worth anything. Made spiritually hollow by their hollow victory over the very concept of need, looking upon a dead world with nothing left to conquer and weeping, unable to escape their suffering and death because they've even conquered that. When Zed, king of the pile of dirt they left behind for the rest of us, offers them a way out, it comes in the form of a gloriously bloody massacre, inviting his fellow brutes into paradise to shoot the out of all of them as they welcome their own slaughter and venerate their murderers. When you look at our world today as the rich and powerful get even more rich and powerful by gaming a system designed by their rich and powerful ancestors to exploit and accrue generational wealth and power at the expense of the labor that is the engine of that very system of exploitation and oppression, it just makes you think, you know? I mean, I'm just saying. Well, I mean, I'm very explicitly not saying or suggesting anything, really. Certainly not anything that might be illegal to suggest publicly. It's just a really cool ending to the movie where the masses rise up and kill a bunch of rich people. That's all I'm saying. An interesting wrinkle of complexity in this otherwise wholesome and morally cohesive story about genociding the 1% comes about when Boorman tries to tackle gender dynamics on top of the broader social and economic landscape of the film's themes. Earlier, I asked if Zardoz was an ironic critique of second-wave feminism, and I stress the word ironic because I've always been troubled by just how much I should take this aspect of the film seriously. Feminism is very much the villain of the piece, and while its opposite, the oppressive masculine patriarchy, is equally embodied in the Brutals, they are not the antagonists of the film, and arguably come out on top in the end without ever needing to question the structure of their misogynistic society as the matriarchal one does. Is this, as it were, the point? And if so, what is the point being made? Though it is obviously reductive, you could distill the plot of Zardoz, at least as it pertains to the themes of sex and gender, as the story of the manliest man who ever manned up, taking on a female-dominated society and bringing it down with the awesome power of his manhood. Coming from a left-wing soy boy perspective, my enjoyment of this aspect of the film hinges on my steadfast belief that it is a joke, or rather a satirical swipe at a hyperbolic right-wing anti-feminist strawman that would have no doubt been as prevalent at the time as it sadly still is today, mocking the idea of the institution of equal rights for women being the death of traditional patriarchal family values, and as such, the end of civilization as we know it. Or should I take it at face value? The era in which this story was born was a time of great societal upheaval on the civil rights front, from bra burning and no-fault divorce to the legalization of abortion and contraception. The first so-called test tube baby, created through in vitro fertilization, the closest real-world equivalent at the time to the cloning process in the film that has removed the reproductive imperative and irrevocably severed men and women from each other into two separate worlds, would only be 4 years away from Zardoz's premiere, and likely the subject of speculative futurist dread at the time of its writing. If my connecting of these then current events with the themes of the film are accurate, do these connections represent a conservative alarmism or a liberal slight against it, or neither extreme? I first described Zed as he is introduced at the beginning of the film as an unrepentant racist barbarian, and the movie doesn't shy away from this fact about his character. He's our protagonist, but not necessarily our hero. At one point early on, his memories are being analyzed by his enlightened captors, and we see him apprehend and rape a woman on a beach as they study his autonomic responses, an act which is almost anthropologically ritualized and treated as a virtue in his savage world, akin to a king's ancient rite of prima nocta. In the same section of the film, Zed's reaction to sexual stimuli is tested in front of a mostly female group of scientists who are shocked to find how easily he can become aroused, given their own sexless biological experience. The first scene is meant to be shocking, the second is a boner joke. The thing about Zed as a stand-in for some flawed ideal of machismo is that his most significant character arc in the film finds him evolving into something more. I wouldn't exactly call it a redemptive arc, and if I thought it was meant to be one, I would regard it as gross and ill-advised as Jaime Lannister's journey in 8 seasons of Game of Thrones from incestuous child crippler to romantic hero. But Zed does change and grow into a different sort of male archetype, barreling through a gauntlet of mind-bending trials that eventually finds him traipsing through the scene in a wedding dress as a sort of, albeit inadequate, karmic punishment for his past treatment of women. A scene which Connery coincidentally objected to on the grounds that it made him look like a sissy. All of this crystallizes, at least for me, in the final shot of the film. After the new world that replaced the old one has itself fallen under the weight of its own terror and hubris, we find Zed and Consuela, now lovers, sitting in a cave, holding hands with each other and staring directly at the camera as a time-lapsed montage reveals the final years of their lives, giving birth to a child who grows into a man and leaves to live his own life, the first natural birth of this new generation free of reproductive oppression. It feels like a quaint middle ground between the two gendered extremes presented throughout the film, a soft statement of the need to work together to achieve a better future over trying to control our fates through sexual violence or technocratic dominance. They are no longer at war, and I guess they're now equals? I don't know. I think it's meant to be a hopeful message anyway. I don't know much from hope anymore these days. I look upon our modern world and the ascendancy of nihilistic chuds like Andrew Tate's manosphere or the rise of the trad wife and the groiper, and I fear we're not just not moving past our problems with sexual politics, but going in the completely wrong direction. We live in a nation controlled by the voting power of a minority of incel freaks, living and rotting behind their computer screens, chanting "your body, my choice," and hoping that if they take enough of their rights away, and if the economic instability caused by a ridiculous tariff regime reduces their career opportunities enough, that maybe women will just be forced by circumstances back into the home and back into chattel slavery, where this legion of unfuckable losers might finally have a chance to bag a good handmaiden wife without having to try hard, or bathe, or develop anything to actually offer the opposite sex. I don't have a solution or a pat ending to this, it just sucks ass. Strangely, the thing that appealed to me most about Zardoz when I discovered it as a much younger man, its cynical treatment of religion as a force of social manipulation and control, now feels like the weakest part in hindsight. I chart my coming of age as a budding atheist through the lens of the media I grew up with, the secular humanism of Star Trek, the skeptical absurdity of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the anti-Messiah narrative of Dune. The book, not the movie, which botches that whole thing. If there was a fourth leg to that stool, it would probably be Scooby-Doo, where every week they would think somebody was supernatural and then pull off the mask and reveal it was just some guy. Until the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo ruined it by making the ghost real and giving Scrappy a significant role. But if there was a fifth leg, there would be Zardoz. But stools don't need 5 legs. It's too many legs. The reveal halfway through the film that the name Zardoz comes from a derivative of the Wizard of Oz, and that the head was a deliberate reference to the fake giant head the wizard used to pretend to be magical, is redundant considering we already find out the head is fake and piloted by a wizard in the first 5 minutes of the movie. And in hindsight, it feels like the kind of half-baked, trying too hard to be clever twist in a modern YA sci-fi novel like Divergent or The Maze Runner. The organization called Wicked is secretly evil? Who would have guessed? Also, it just feels like the arguments about faith versus reason that used to animate me now just seem so picayune in light of all the other things we have to fight about. I didn't expect for this to get so melancholy. I could go on forever, and it seems like I already have, but I guess the main point I have to make here is that Zardoz is not just my favorite movie, but possibly the most objectively awesome sci-fi movie ever made. I didn't even get into some of the more oddly prescient bits that wouldn't have really been on contemporary sci-fi's radar at the time, like the tabernacle's soul-crushing artificial intelligence, stagnating human ingenuity, or the tyranny of an immortal society echoing our current government's slow, suffocating death by gerontocracy, or that one weird scene where a bunch of text and artwork is reflected on Zed's body so he can learn through his skin, or that weird opening scene where the wizard's floating head spouts a bunch of bullshit that was added to the movie by the studio to help explain it, but hilariously explains nothing. Or that other weird scene where the apathetics all try to lick Sean Connery's delicious man sweat to finally feel alive again. Or that other weird scene where... You get the idea. If you've never seen Zardoz, and you don't mind me having just spoiled all the good parts of it, I highly recommend that you track it down and give it a shot. Ignore the haters and resist the temptation to prejudge it as an outdated farce. Just tackle it on its own terms, and play around in its bizarre magic world for less time than you might have thought given its admittedly slow 70s pacing. There are so many different threads to pull on, and you're bound to find something you like, even if it's just Sean Connery's mighty red bulge. The gun is good, the penis is evil, and Zardoz rules.